Chapter 7. Brynn stood in front of the mirror in her room, absorbing every detail of the outfit she decided to try on before leaving for Thanksgiving dinner. Her aquamarine dress. Her eyes hovered at the same spots on that day she'd had her first lunch with Finn. Even now, the bulges didn't disappear. It still drew odd lines over every curve. But with her jaw clenched, she clasped her mother's necklace at the back of her neck and watched it settle into the crest just under her collarbone. Numbness tingled over her skin like a shield against the night. With a weighted breath, she resisted the urge to change out of the dress and pull her hair up into her usual bun. Instead, she grabbed her coat from the edge of her bed and left the room. "See you tomorrow, Soraya," Brynn called to her roommate. "See you, Brynn," she said, without looking away from her laptop on the coffee table. "Have a good time." Brynn crossed the room and slipped into her shoes. With Soraya waving her off, Brynn opened the front door and left. On the bus, Brynn kept her head down, staring at her hands folded in her lap, enveloped by the aquamarine fabric. She felt glances from other passengers like knife slices. She shrunk further into her seat until it dug into her back, her fingers curling into fists that stung her knuckles with tension. The small pendant of her mother's necklace warmed that little dewdrop spot on her chest. As the bus wove its way through streets, stopping at rests, and slowly losing passengers, Brynn counted her breaths. And when that slowed enough, she started counting heartbeats. When the bus driver announced her stop, Brynn pursed her lips, grasped the pendant, and rose from her seat. A couple of other people flew down the aisle of the bus. Otherwise, she was the final passenger. "Thank you," she said on a breath as she passed the driver to exit. The street was empty, the air charged with deserted stillness. It's so different. Compared to the bustling cars, crowds, and noise she was used to whenever she visited her hometown, this was alien. It's gotta be Thanksgiving. The eerie difference quieted some of the quaking in her limbs as she headed down the familiar route to her childhood home. It felt like a walk to the gallows. When's the last time I was here for Thanksgiving? For any holiday? She tried to focus on tracing the answer through her memory as she let her feet guide the way. But once she was in front of the familiar door, her little investigation couldn't distract her anymore. Gulping down more than a breath, she walked up the rickety wooden steps and faced the doorbell. Before she could even bring herself to press the button, though, the door swung open. It hadn't been long since the twins' birthday party, but it had been years since drawing the full weight of her stepmother's gaze. Her heart-shaped face, perfectly framed by her blonde bob, somehow looked no different than it had when she'd first met the woman 12 years ago. Her ice blue eyes peered openly at Brynn with all the warmth of a dead fire pit. Brynn's stomach sent nausea up into her throat. "How long were you planning to stand there?" she said, her eyes narrowing as they swiped over Brynn's frame and hovered for a beat too long just below her collarbone. "If you loiter like that, the neighbors will talk. Come in already." "Thank you," Brynn said. But her throat constricted around the words, strangling them. Her stepmother said, turning around and heading for the kitchen. "Dinner'll be ready in an hour. The twins are upstairs." "Thank you." Brynn hesitated in the entryway as she listened to her stepmother's retreating steps. After a long inhale, she focused on steadying the twitching in her fingers before starting for the stairs. As she climbed the first few steps, she glanced into the living room. Her father sat in a recliner, watching a football game. She swallowed the years of peering hopefully at her father in the living room from these stairs until it faded to the grave by the time she was 18. She breathed uneasily, her chest filling with the smoke of childhood fires. Pulling her gaze from her father's chair, she continued climbing the stairs and ignored her own absence in the family photos blanketing the walls while she went. She followed the voices trickling into the hallway from Riley's room. After a soft tap on the door, she paused to listen. "It's Brynn," Riley called out, with all the excitement of a 6-year-old spotting a candy store. Brynn's lips tugged at the corners as she turned the knob and pushed inside. "Brynn!" Riley and Quinn jumped from their beanbags on the floor, abandoning their gaming controllers to the carpet. "Yes, right. This is why I'm here." Both of them barreling into her, she nearly lost her balance. "Hi," she said through a raspy, knocked-out breath. "What are you two up to?" "Mom kicked us out of the kitchen," Riley said. "Were you stealing bites again?" Brynn asked. Riley's gaze flung to the ground, and she had to stifle a chuckle. "Riley's always getting us in trouble," Quinn said, crossing her arms over her chest. "I got kicked up here too, but I didn't even do anything." Brynn bit down on her lips to keep the giggles from flying out. "So, what are you playing?" she asked, trying to guess from glancing at the screen. "Just some stupid racing game Riley made me play." "You made me play your stupid anime game the other day." "It's not stupid. Neither is mine." Brynn was really struggling not to laugh as she watched them stare each other down like a cartoon face-off. "Well, can I join?" Brynn asked. "How about we play?" "Yes," Riley said, almost bouncing at her side. "Yeah," Quinn said. "That game's only good when you're here, Brynn." Brynn's lips slipped at the corners. "Then, let's play," she said. Riley pulled out another beanbag from his closet, set it between the two already facing the little TV, and handed Brynn another controller for the gaming system. Sitting down, she settled into a familiar rhythm as they developed a little, cozy farm together. "Riley, Quinn," her stepmother's voice slid under the door. "Dinner's ready." "It's already been an hour?" Brynn's eyes flew to the clock on the opposite wall. "Guess it's time, huh?" Brynn said, stretching as she rose from the beanbag. Mashed potatoes and pie. Popping up like a jack-in-the-box, Riley started for the door, bounding through it. Brynn was a step behind when a tug on her dress drew her gaze over her shoulder. "Brynn," Quinn said in a voice so quiet, Brynn had to lean in to hear. "Are you sure?" Brynn's eyes locked with Quinn's, and the worry-drenched ache she saw there cracked her ribs open. "About being here, I mean?" Brynn choked on a breath. "Of course," she said, her eyes squeezing together as pressure built behind them. I want to be here with you both. Brynn forced her mouth into a smile, but Quinn only sighed. Okay, she said, wrapping her arms around Brynn. Returning the hug, Brynn's ribs stitched back together, but it left behind a hammering bruise. Dropping her arms, Quinn headed for the door, and Brynn followed her through the house until they reached the open doorway to the dining room. Quinn didn't hesitate at the threshold, but Brynn did. Peering into the small room that could barely hold the 6-person table, the fluorescence trickled out to where Brynn stood. Swallowing the curdled years in her memories, she stared at her father as he pulled out one of the chairs, his gaze downcast and focused on the wood grains. Brynn, what now? Must you always loiter? Unclenching her jaw, she stepped into the room, taking a seat across from the twins. I want to sit with Brynn, Riley yelled out. Brynn had to fight the curve of her lips as he jumped up with his plate in hand. Just sit down, Riley, his mom said, the words eking out between her teeth. Aw, he moaned as he dropped into his seat once again, his begrudging frown doing everything in its power to break Brynn's hold on the hysterical laughter bubbling in her gut. Now, we give thanks. Dad's voice. How many years has it been since I heard it? Her eyes drifted to him as he dropped his head. Out of the corner of her vision, Brynn caught the others bowing their heads too. God, thank you for the gifts of food this day, and for the company of family, he said, and his low voice competed against the water dripping from the faucet in the kitchen. And thank you for returning our daughter on this family occasion. Brynn's body froze, like live wires were threading through her veins. She stared at her plate, the white porcelain acting as a black hole that swallowed her. Amen. The word rang out and hit her ears. What? She couldn't make sense of it. Amen, the others chorused back. Brynn's mouth dried out. No words could make it past her throat. Yes, her stepmother said, against the cacophony of metal meeting porcelain. Thank the Lord for the prodigal daughter's return. Brynn's gaze moved to the incomprehensible sounds. The woman who sat where her mother once did lifted her chin as she met Brynn's eyes. The blue in her irises blew winter winds towards her. Brynn couldn't feel her own body. Maybe now, she'll actually fulfill her duties to this family. Brynn's vision lurched into a blur, and then her father was all she could see. He looked up, his gaze meeting hers. How many years? The green in his eyes, the color that matched her own. She hadn't seen it in years. And then they were gone, his focus back to the dinner spread. She heard the scraping of the chair against the hardwood, but until she saw the table from a bird's eye perspective, she didn't realize it was her own chair. 4 pairs of eyes stared at her. How rude, Brynn. You don't stand in the middle of dinner. My goodness, were you raised in a barn? Brynn swallowed against the desert in her mouth. Riley, Quinn. Even in her own voice, she sounded strange to her own ears. Words leaving her body like they had their own brain. No matter what, I always love you both. Always. And you can always, always come to me for anything. Anything. Ever. Still feeling separated from her own body, Brynn whirled around the chair, catching sight of her father's stare as she did. She held it for a beat, seeing the slightest rim of white around his irises, and then she turned away. When she made it through the open doorway to the living room, her stepmother's voice breached the quiet, but Brynn heard none of the words. She held on to nothing as the angry ramblings bounced off her ears. She just kept moving. And moving. Before she knew it, she was at the bus stop.
Finn. Finn sat, hunched over his knees, a gaming console's controller in his hands. The screen in front of him erupted in explosions and blood as his fingers worked through muscle memory on the buttons. When the screen faded to black with a triumphant message, he tossed the controller on the cushion next to him, blinking against the screen-induced eye-watering, red streaked across his closed lids. Her dinner should be about done. Grabbing his phone from the coffee table, he typed out a message. How was dinner? Knowing she takes forever to text, he picked up the gaming controller again, but before he could start the next match, his phone buzzed. Brows tensing, Finn stared at the message on his lock screen. After reading the words twice, he straightened up against the couch's back. Where are you now? He typed so fast, his thumbs cramped, and he swore he heard the swoosh of the message delivery before he even clicked the send button. He stared at the screen, waiting, but it felt like sitting in a car compactor as it slowly pressed in. When he thought the pressure would implode, the text chime finally rang, echoing in the silent room. He glanced at it. The bus stop. His jaw locking like a crocodile bite, he turned off the game he'd been playing on his newest console and stood. I'm staying 'cause there's no buses back that late on Thanksgiving. Those words she'd said at their lunch reverberated, pounding his head. Then what's she gonna do? Stay at the bus stop all night? Any warmth left his skin, nausea squirmed in his gut. She would stay at that bus stop all night. Grabbing his coat draped over the coffee table, he headed for his front door. Wasting no time with his lace-up shoes, he slipped on the easiest pair he had before slipping out of his apartment. When he got to his car in the parking lot, he froze. The bus stop. Every time he blinked, the text message reflected back at him like it was imprinted on the inside of his eyelids. What the hell's with that? How the hell am I supposed to... Ugh, he cried out, the buzzing in his chest spreading all over his body like a swarm of locusts. His hands balled into fists, his nails threatened to break skin as his fingers tensed. Damn it! The bubbling frustration pulled his arm back like a spring before it flew into his car door. Shit, he yelled, and his hand throbbed where flesh met metal. He swallowed as he stretched out his fingers. He felt every pinprick of pain in the process. Letting out a stagnant breath, he leaned against the car, the cool metal pressing against his forehead. Okay, think, he said to himself. Think. He racked his memory for anything she'd said about where her parents lived. His fingers curled around the handle of the car, tightening his grip when he remembered a conversation in their texts. Once he settled into the driver's seat, Finn scrolled and scrolled until he found the name in a random text. Memorizing the spelling, he typed in the name of the town in his map app. When he started the ignition, he only had the town name as his general guide of direction, but he drove. Anything to shorten the distance. The dark roads and twilight evening were perfect for his imagination, flashing Brynn back at him, sitting at an empty bus stop with night falling, someone finding her there, someone that was not him, someone that might. His foot pressed further on the pedal. By the time he reached the town center, the destination of the only concrete information he had, his nerves were frayed thin. Parked in a lot by a small park with a gazebo, he started searching for bus stops, bus stations. Anything that had the word bus in it, he searched, and as the little markers on his map revealed how many there were, he felt it like they were all weights crashing down on him. Looking up, he stared out his windshield for half a second, but it was long enough to see that the sunset was tipping into night. His knuckles cracked as he gritted his teeth, and then he was off again. Where the hell am I going? But he passed down streets at a pace that probably marked him as a grandpa to any observers. He crawled down roads, craned his neck, and strained his eyes, searching for figures outlined in the dark. Brynn, where are you? When he saw a faint silhouette seated at a bench covered in the shadow of an awning, a breath flew out of his chest and left it aching like someone had ripped out his beating heart. He stopped the car and jumped out. Brynn! His voice was strangled and eerie in the stillness of the empty residential street. The silhouette flinched, head whipping to him. He swallowed against the anticipation paralyzing his body. The figure stepped out from under the awning, peeking around it. She set the night on fire with her flaming curls as the light from a street lamp caught the strands. Her eyes peered at him, open wide like a deer's. Breath racing, he soaked in her expression, the ragged exhaustion in her eyes. Brynn! It was just a whisper. Her eyes lifted, and a spark lit there when they met his, brightening her face. Finn, she said, and there was an almost unnoticeable quiver in her voice. It broke his paralysis, but before he could do a thing, Brynn walked forward. The ocean-colored dress she wore billowed around her like she was some kind of sea goddess gracing land. A bitingly cold breath sliced down his throat directly down to his lower limbs as he watched her slow but deliberate movement toward him. When she was close enough for him to reach, he shook his head and blinked. "Are you okay?" he asked when she was only a step or two away, but she didn't stop. The top of her head just cleared his shoulder as she wrapped her arms around his waist and laid her face against his chest. "You've got to stop asking me that," she said. His ears could barely hear it, like a breeze through wind-rustled trees. But her voice touched his chest in little vibrations. Head completely blank, his body pulsed to the beat of a deep bass, but it surged, carrying electric fire to his bones. With crackling flames in his muscles, he pulled her closer to him.
Brynn. Brynn closed her eyes, Finn's arms encircling her like shields against the onslaught of images and voices in her head. The prodigal daughter. Like ricocheting bullets, those words rattled around until she felt hollowed out. She sucked in a breath, and a strange groan flew out. "Hey," Finn said, and then his hands were curled around her shoulders. Tightening his grip just enough, he pulled her out of the memories threatening to drown her. She lifted her gaze, meeting his eyes, and golden pools with little flecks of green reflected back. How long did it take him to get here? Hours? All evening? "You came," she said, trying to make sense of it all. "Yeah," he said, with an exhale that seemed to release all the air in his body. But a light chuckle followed. "I didn't have much to go on." "Why did you come?" "You found me," she said, and his gaze was hers again. One corner of his mouth slid into a smile, but his eyes glossed over as they held hers. "Yeah," he said. "I knew. I just knew you'd have stayed here, at this bus stop. That was the plan." She looked away and sucked in a breath, stepping back. "What now?" she asked, her hand closing around her mother's pendant. "I take you back," he said. "Back where?" The electric buzz of the street lamp was the only answer. She glanced up at him. "Where?" he echoed once their eyes met. "To your apartment." "No," she said, the word bolting out of her like steam trying to escape a pressure cooker. Soraya's face popped into her head. "No, I can't," she said, shaking her head. I can't deal with the questions. Okay, got it, he said, his voice distilling into some kind of balm. A shaky breath fell from her lips, just as Finn's finger brushed under her chin. Then, let's get in the car, he said, tilting her head back until their eyes met. We can drive. We'll just drive. The heat from his skin along her jaw calmed the storm rumbling inside her.
Finn. Finn stared at the dark 2-lane highway, winding like a snake ahead of him. Curly red hair flew around, caught in the current of hot air blasting through the car. Glancing over at her, he let go of a strained breath when he noticed she was no longer shivering. What am I doing? The road through the windshield blurred as his mind replayed the last 2 hours. Her text, his reaction, his body moving on its own. Never seen you go out of your way like that. Finn held back a chuckle. If only Arden knew about this. The image of her, alone, at night, on the streets, still reverberated in his brain like a fire alarm. His hands curled around the wheel in a death grip as he glanced over at her, but she was staring out the window. Hey, he said. Her gaze was his for only a second before her focus slipped to her hands in her lap. He said, is there anywhere you want to go? She said, I'll just go back to my apartment. His mind filled with her panic-stricken face when he first suggested it. But I can't bother you more than I already have, she said. Bother? Blinking a couple of times, he looked over at her for a moment, trying to gather any clues he could. But he was stumped. It's not a bother, he said. But you drove all the way out here already, she said, without an address or anything, and She blew out a sigh. I can't burden you anymore. I don't think of it that way, he said. But, she started, turning to him. I don't get how it couldn't be. The thought of you spending the night at a bus stop, he said. I couldn't let that be real. I don't really get it myself, but it's not a burden. It's what I wanted to do. She inhaled sharply, and he glanced at her. For the limited view he could get, he noticed her hand clutched around that necklace again. Curiosity overwhelmed him, but he bit his tongue. And if you don't want to go back to your apartment right now, then that's fine, he said. Thank you, she said, and her voice was all clipped and raspy before a gurgling noise cut through the car. When he looked over, her face was flushed and she was staring at her stomach. It took every ounce of restraint he had not to laugh or crack a joke. We should grab something to eat. Is anywhere even open at this time? She asked. He grinned. Yeah, he said. It may not be great food, but there's got to be a gas station open somewhere around here. Nodding her head, she rubbed the back of her neck. Yeah, she said. That sounds good. As he slowed for the stop at the end of the off-ramp, he let his eyes linger over her face for a little longer. Red-rimmed eyes, her face paling, she looked tired. She needs rest. His own studio popped into his head, but it tensed every muscle in his body. So after we get some food, he said, we could go to my apartment if you want.